We are in the book of Job, 16, 17, and 18, where things start to finally get a little bit different. Tiny bit spice, David. Always first, David. Good evening, family. Tonight is going to be great. I can feel it. Love y'all. Love you, David. Good to see you. Ooh, let's fix that. There we go. There we go. And then on Tuesday, we have Decoding the Names of God, which I have not gotten ready yet, but that's what won the poll. We've done a lot of non-poll Tuesdays, but the normal theme for Tuesday is majority rules. So going back to that, we did the poll, and Decoding the Names of God has won. And then for second place, the history of astrology and what is idolatry actually tied, which are good, which means both of those I'll put on the poll for next week, so they have a second chance. And then this Tuesday, we will talk about the names of God, which is helpful to me because I'm doing it in something else right now too. So it's like added study time and added conversation for a topic that I already have to deal with. Graves. Good to see you, Graves. So Tuesday will be cool. That'll be a good talk. It's a very, very, very extremely in-depth talk about the names of God. So that'll be interesting. We'll see. And then Thursday, we have the Book of Giants still. And then hopefully Saturday, we'll be able to start the Gospel of Judas. Our household is going to have a lot of stuff going on over the next couple months. So there may be some drop-offs on certain nights, like what happened last night. Discord's open. And then I'll pull you up here because I know you like to be ready. So just heads up. Hey all, I'm out of town, so I'll be in and out periodically. Love you all. All good, dude. Enjoy the time. Hopefully for a good reason with the family. Am like wrapped up in Cleo, pun intended. And for anybody who does not know, that is a snake. That is a snake. Very cute. So we are in 16, and then I have to work when we're done. So I'm going to have to cut it off as soon as we finish. 16, 17, and 18. I don't feel like there's a lot that needs to be recapped. We're in the midst of the text where it's just the back and forth between the friends who aren't really friends and Job himself. And so where we pick up is Job replying to one of the friends. Who was it? The last friend was Eliphaz, the punster. So now this is Job responding to Eliphaz. Then Job answered and said, I have heard many things. Miserable comforters are you. Irony. Job uses the same Hebrew term that Eliphaz used in his remarks prior to this, which was Amal, A-M-A-L, to refer to his friends as troublesome or miserable, rather than being the comforters that Job is begging for. Job is begging for comfort from his friends, if not comfort from God. So the same Hebrew term gets thrown back at the friends. So there's a little bit of irony in that, and I like that. Shall windy words have an end? Or what provokes you that you answer? I also could speak as you do. If you were in my place, I could join words together against you and shake my head at you. I could strengthen you with my mouth, and the solace of my lips would assuage your pain. If I speak, my pain is not assuaged. And if I forbear, how much of it leaves me? Surely now God has worn me out. He has made desolate all my company, and he has shriveled me up, which is a witness against me. And my leanness has risen up against me, it testifies to my face. He has torn me in his wrath and hated me. He has gnashed his teeth at me. Repetitive proverb language, ancient Eastern proverb language. Some of it found in Psalm, some of it found outside of the Hebrew Bible, but common stuff. So the Hebrew word used in 9, the beginning 9a, the beginning line of 9. He has torn me in his wrath and has hated me. There are a number of different translations for some of this stuff, but the Hebrew word that gets used is very closely related to Satan, just meaning accuser or adversary. So Job is Job is labeling God as that, the accuser or the adversary, because of the context of what's going on. Job obviously feels that God has not just abandoned him, which was kind of the complaint at the beginning, but now at this point, it's that God has become his enemy. God has become a Satan to Job, falsely accusing him of things that he did not do. And then he gnashed his teeth at me, giving that imagery that the Bible likes to give of wild animals. Wild animals are a very common imagery for the Bible to show, like, not necessarily evil, but viciousness. And I feel like that's the right word here. The viciousness of the predator towards the prey. And in a lot of these old poetic writings, the lamenter, it was very common for them to put this imagery of the wild animal devouring them. It's all over. Even within the Bible, it's all over. Not the prophetic, the Proverbs, the Psalm. That imagery is all over. Super common, super famous. Thank you, David. Thank you, David. I have to do everything different on Sunday, and it drives me crazy. The way the windows work in the streaming thing is a pain in the butt. It's different than any other day, so I apologize. Thank you. My adversary sharpens his eyes against me. Men have gaped at me with their mouth. They have struck me insolently on their cheek. They mass themselves together against me. Are you doing Snaky?
No, this is Genesis.
Okay. She brought the lizard back. They mass themselves together against me. God gives me up to the ungodly and casts me into the hands of the wicked. I was at ease, and he broke me apart. He seized me by the neck and dashed me into pieces. The imagery is getting much more brutal if you're paying attention. This is a threshold in the book of Job where it's much more harsh what Job is saying or what Job is accusing God of. He has me up at his target, as his target. His archers surround me. He slashes open my kidneys and does not spare. He pours out my gall on the ground. He breaks me with breach upon breach. He runs upon me like a warrior. I have sewed sackcloth upon my skin. Vivid imagery. So when he runs upon me like a warrior, it's being applied to God. The Hebrew term gibor, which is usually describes God's protection of people. Here, it's portraying the opposite. It's portraying God as the opponent, as the aggressor. So very interesting, because we get this term a lot throughout the Old Testament, and it's always in a positive, or it's always in a positive light. It's always applied to the people in a positive sense of protection from the warriors running upon. Here, it's God who is the warrior that is running upon him. He said, I have sewed sackcloth upon my skin. Whoop. Okay. Upon my skin, and I've laid my strength in the dust. My face is red with weeping, and on my eyelids is a deep darkness. Although there is no violence in my hands, and my prayer is pure. So, 15. I've sewn sackcloth upon my skin. That's like a very, I don't know, we've talked about it a bunch of times, but the shaving of the head, the wearing sackcloth, the wearing of the ashes, it gets expressed a lot. I believe in Jonah that terminology is used, but it's all to express this mourning. So the Hebrew text expressing or indicating that Job sewed this directly onto his skin. It's very hyperbolic to show just how dramatic it is. Very dramatic, above what has been dramatic. Much more descriptive than just saying I got beat up. Yeah, very descriptive. And much different than how he's been speaking. And that's what's interesting about when you get deeper into the text. There's a really, really very well drawn out arc to the story if you pay attention. And it's much harder the way that we read it because it's once a week. But if you were to just sit and read this story, you could read it in an hour for sure. I mean, if you're a decent reader, you could read it in an hour. But if you actually just read through the entire thing, like if you got a paraphrase Bible versus a word for word Bible, because word for word is sometimes hard for people who aren't super into it, but a paraphrase actually tells you a story. It's just not as accurate, but it's perfectly fine if you're trying to get the arc of the story. But if you use a paraphrase Bible to read through some of the stories, and this is definitely one of them, you can just see this beautiful arc that the author set in motion. And it was just done really well. Like, it's very high grade literature. It doesn't get enough credit, in my opinion. My face is red with weeping, and on my eyelids is deep darkness, although there is no violence in my hands, and my prayer is pure. O earth, cover not my blood, and let my cry find no resting place. So he's wishing for the vindication that he's been begging for and has not come. He seems to still have hope that cover not my blood, that his blood will cry out after his death. And if that sounds somewhat familiar, it's from Genesis with Abel. It's actually a pretty impressive drawback from the story of Genesis. O earth, cover not my blood, and let my cry find no resting place. So as Abel's blood cried out to God in Genesis, if you remember that, Genesis 4:10, it cries out to God, and that's how God then came to Cain and starts the whole kind of winding down of the text. Sorry, I had to turn the volume down on something, but it starts the winding down of that story. You have kind of a hit back here in Job to it, and I think it's very smart. It's very smart as far as literature goes. It's very well done. Even now, behold, my witness is in heaven, and he who testifies for me is on high. My friends scorn me. My eye pours out tears to God, that he would argue the case of a man with God, as a son of man does with his neighbor. For when a few years have come, I shall go the way from which I shall not return. And that is all of 16. 16 short, 17 short, and 18 I think is a little bit longer. Either way, we're going to breeze tonight. My spirit is broken. My days are extinct. The graveyard is ready for me. Surely there are mockers about me, and my eye dwells on their provocation. Lay down a pledge with me, you. Who is there who will pull up scrutiny for me? Security for me. I apologize. Lay down a pledge for me with you. Who is there who will pull up security for me? So he's asking, he's begging, again, in a sense. He's begging God to provide the required proof of his innocence now to his friends. So like, if it wasn't bad enough what he was actually dealing with and what he was going through, just on a personal level, losing your family, losing your wealth, losing your land, essentially losing virtually everything in your life. If that wasn't bad enough, what he still has left are his friends and his wife. His wife was curse God and die, Job. His friends are blaming him for everything that's happening, lecturing him basically about how he's not worthy and he's a sinner and needs to apologize to God and do all these things. Job, knowing he didn't do anything wrong, but as if all of that wasn't bad enough, he's just been begging for God to show him what was going on. But now, after all these back and forths between the friends treating him like crap and accusing him of things and him having to defend himself, now he's flipping in a sense, and now he's begging God for proof of his innocence so that he can essentially shove it in the face of his friends. And not so much in an aggressive way, but I need to be able to prove my innocence to these people. Now it's not just for him. Now he has to do it for everybody around him as well because he's being dragged through the mud so much. It's really brutal if you think about it. Since you have closed their hearts to understanding, therefore you will not let them triumph. So this is interesting because at the end of the text, this comes full circle. But Job believes that God prevented his friends from understanding his innocence. He implores God to show them that that is wrong. Therefore, you will not let them triumph. And this comes back at the end of the text when everything becomes clear and God actually does kind of hold the friends accountable for their poor theology. So I love these because they scatter them throughout the text, where this that happens here in 17 comes to light in the 30s. And it's really interesting to see it come full circle. He who informs against his friends to get a share of their property, the eyes of his child will fail. He has made me a byword of the people. Depending on translation, it might say proverb. I know the translation I normally use says proverb. He has made me a proverb for the people. So rather than revealing Job's innocence, which is what Job needs from God and what Job's been asking for from God, in Job's perspective, God has just humiliated him to his wife, to his friends, based on the text, to others that aren't main characters of the text. So Job's words get echoed in several other laments in the Old Testament. The same type of thing happens in Psalm in two places. I believe in 44 and in 69. This same run gets used. So he has made me a byword or a proverb of the people, and I am one before whom men spit. My eye has grown dim from vexation, and all my members are like a shadow. The upright are appalled at this, and the innocent stirs himself up against the godless. Yet the righteous holds to his way, and he who has clean hands grows stronger and stronger. Hey, Patricia. But you come on again, all of you, and I shall not find a wise man among you. My days are past, my plans are broken off, the desire of my heart. They make night into day. The light, they say, is near to the darkness. If I hope for Sheol as my house, if I make my bed in darkness, if I say to the pit, you are my father, and to the worm, my mother or my sister, where then is my hope? Who will see my hope? Will it go down to the bars of Sheol? That might be translated for you as gates, bars. I don't like that. The bars. It doesn't make as much sense to me. The last part B of that verse 16 though says, shall we descend together into the dust? This ending is really interesting. From 12 on, you have another section that's very heavily geared towards death, towards Sheol. And not the little, not sarcastic, but kind of sarcastic mentions of death. I guess it wouldn't be called sarcastic. But Job has mentioned death throughout. He's kind of thrown it out there like, oh, I wish I was dead. Even his wife with the curse God and die, Job. You have a lot of that. But then this is very poetic. They make night into day, the light. They make night into day. The light, they say, is near to the darkness. If I hope for Sheol as my house, if I make my bed in darkness, if I say to the pit, you are my father, and to the worm, you are my mother or my sister, where then is my hope? Who will see my hope? Will it go down to the bars of Sheol? David said a holding cell. I like this. Yes. I think that's fantastic because we talked about this some, I think, last week. And then we talked about it when we talked about purgatory or hell. And hell would have been last week. But there was a verse last Sunday where it seemed as though he wanted to like take a break in Sheol, where you could possibly exegete it that he wanted to go there and then come back. Like he just wanted to get away from his life for a while and go down to the depths of the darkness and then eventually come back up, which is interesting. So it's interesting you said that too, David, but I just think this is so poetic. It's different. I guess is what kind of gets me about it. But in the Hebrew, the The Hebrew text from 15 and 16, it again uses the term Sheol, which has been brought up a number of times and we've talked about it, but he's not only referencing just Sheol itself, the realm of the dead, but he's also referencing the gates of it. That's what's interesting, and that's why I don't like it says bars. It should say, will it go down to the gates of Sheol? I feel like gates is better for English speakers because it makes more sense with what it's actually trying to portray. The reason I say that is because in chapter 38, God talks to Job, and God says, have the gates of death been revealed to you, or have you seen the gates of the deep darkness? It's a direct draw from right here. And I don't know why some translations goof this up. They muddy the water. I don't like it. But very interesting. Job has a lot of these, call them Easter eggs, I guess, to make it make sense for people who don't know otherwise. There's a lot of those where if you really pay attention, the end of the text draws on so much of the rest of the text. You can really put a lot together, and it's very interesting. It was really well done. We can't say that enough. This text was really well done. Then Bildad the Shuhite answered and said, and we've heard a couple times from him, so this is not a new person. It's just another round of it. How long will you hunt for words? Consider, and then we will speak. Why are we counted as cattle? Why are we stupid in your sight? So, consider, and then we will speak. As his friends, as it was in his first speech, Bildad's first speech, he's starting off the next one with a rebuke, which has been what he's been doing the entire time. It's what most of the friends have been doing the entire time. Bildad had previously rebuked Job for what he had said about God back in 8:3, which he said, does God pervert justice, or does the Almighty pervert the right? Which is sarcastic. He's being sarcastic because he knows and Job knows that's not true. But he's trying to say that Job is talking as if that were true. Here, what's happening from the rebuke is to defend himself, as well as Eliphaz, as well as Zophar, who are the three friends in the story, who have been rebuking him this entire time. Because the dynamic has slowly shifted. Just like in the last chapter, in 17, Job now not only has to defend himself against God, Job now feels as though he has to defend himself against his friends and God. And now rather than wanting vindication for himself from what's going on, he wants vindication for himself in the face of his friends. The dynamic is slowly shifting. Likewise here, the friends aren't just rebuking Job for the things Job has done, which is nothing, but what they think he's done to get this type of havoc from God. Now his friends are going to start defending themselves. And it starts a very important dynamic shift that goes all the way to the next, or all the way to the end of the story. You have to pay attention to the arc, because the arc is changing. Consider, and then we will speak. Why are we counted as cattle? Why are we stupid in your sight? He's ignoring Job's pleas for understanding, is what Job is asking for. He's been asking for understanding. Why won't you understand? Why won't you sympathize with me? And he's continuing to be he's continuing to be the worthless physician, was the term that was used in chapter 6, and then in chapter 13, and then in chapter 16, just at the beginning. The term worthless physician was used earlier in the text. That's what Job is accusing him of being. And it's a bit sarcastic, and it's kind of just funny. But you said maybe the word bar is used for bars of Sheol because Job feels trapped in depression. I think that's fair. I think it's fair. I assume that the reason they use bars is because if you think about when you think about like the gates of hell, most people I think of like barred gates. So I get it. Right, because I think that's even what I kind of picture is like a big gate like you'd see outside of a rich person's neighborhood. The big gates that swing open, and they're barred gates, like metal or steel barred gates. I think it's fair. But the thing is, Job wants to go there. So I don't know, is used for bars of Sheol because Job feels trapped in depression. Maybe. I'd have to think about that a little more. I know the story is telling us that he wants to go there. And I guess on two fronts. Like, he wants to go there because of exactly what you said. Like, he's depressed. He's got no hope. He's trying. That's another interesting thing, too. If you pay really, really tight attention, you can see the hope. If you just were to study hope out of the book of Job, you'd have a lot to have to pay attention to, like a lot of data to pull. Because just like anybody else who's emotional, it's a wave of having a little hope, losing the hope, having a little hope, losing the hope. And you have to kind of track it along the way. But the last we had was a mix where there was an expression of hopelessness, and then there was an expression of trying to hang on to that last little bit of hope. So I think that's right. And I think the bars are just because of the gate. Like, I get why people use them interchangeably. I just don't think it's the greatest picture, especially because even in this translation later in the 30s, the word gate is used. So I don't fully grasp why. The depression bit, I think for sure. Oh, I'm not going to throw all that on the screen. You who tear yourself in your anger, shall the earth be forsaken for you, or the rock be removed out of its place? Indeed, the light of the wicked is put out, and the flame of his fire does not shine. The light is dark in his tent, and his lamp above him is put out. Indeed, the light of the wicked is put out, is another kind of common, it's a common mention from the Proverbs. So Proverb 13 has it, Proverb 20 has it, and Proverbs 24 also has it. The light of the wicked being mentioned. This was like just a super conventional teaching in a lot of wisdom literature. So Bildad, his sentiment is reflected in those other proverbs, and this is just another reflection of it. His strong steps are shortened, and his own schemes throw him down. Might refer to a failing or worsening physical condition. His strong steps are shortened, but it more likely refers to a wicked person's actions being interrupted, being interrupted or stopped, extinguished in a sense, because Proverbs 4:12 says, when you walk, your step will not be hampered. If you run, you will not stumble. The same term is used. It's Tsarar. Tsarar? No idea. But the same term is used to describe someone whose steps are not hindered. Having a wide path to walk would indicate security and stability. And there's a similar one in Psalm 18:19, which says, He brought me out into a broad place. He rescued me because he delighted in me. So a lot of these images and trying to make sense of them, does it mean anything? Doesn't it? Does it relate to the Proverbs 4:12 or the Psalm 18:19? Loosely, maybe directly. It's hard to say, but it's at least worth bringing up. Is it a metal bar or could there be bars in Sheol and Job wanted to get a drink? Maybe that's why he wants to go so bad. This is all starting to come together, actually. That would make a lot more sense. The depressed guy just wants to get a drink. You can't blame him, I suppose. For he is cast into a net by his own feet, and he walks on its mesh. A trap seizes him by the heel. A snare lays hold of him. A rope is hidden for him in the ground, a trap for him in the path. Terrors frighten him on every side and chase him at his heels. His strength is famished, and calamity is ready for his stumbling. So this section is important, 8 through 11, 8, 9, and 10, basically. For he cast into a net by his own feet. So Bildad uses a total of 6 different terms for a trap or a snare here. he seems very confident that the wickedness will lead to being trapped in the direction of Job. So Job's wickedness will lead to him being trapped. Whether those who are wicked are caught in their own traps, as expressed in those verses, or hidden traps, also expressed in those verses. One example of this is in Psalm 57:6, which says, they set a net for my steps. Here it said, for he is cast into a net by his own feet. Psalm 57:6, they set a net for my steps. My soul was bowed down. They dug a pit in my way, but they have fallen into it themselves. Interesting. The wisdom literature, connections, man. But he's confident that wickedness will lead to a trap. And it doesn't matter whether it was the wickedness being caught in their own trap or being caught by hidden traps, like in Psalm 57. Job 4:8 also had a similar mention, but pretty heavy expression for the trap bit. Obviously, this character is extremely confident that Job is wicked. All of them are. The friends are convinced that Job is wicked. Nobody is open to the idea at all that something else is going on. This is all a matter of his own doing. It has nothing to do with anything else. God is justified in punishing him. Satan has nothing to do with it. And it is solely just because of Job's wickedness. Yeah, they sure liked nets. David said, latched on to my hand and wrist till his hand. Okay. This is a part of that conversation. Oh my gosh, I got to go back and read this when we're done. Wild. I feel like David's always at risk of being bitten by something. The sheer number of literal wild animals that he's around. It's not a bad way to live. It's not a bad way to live. It consumes the parts of his skin. The firstborn of death consumes his limbs. Bildad is probably, I guess you have to say, talking about Job's condition, like his medical condition. If you remember from earlier in the text, he's viewing the physical marks on Job, the sores on Job, and Job's illness in general, as proof of the guilt. This is proof of your guilt. It consumes the parts of his skin. The firstborn of death consume his limbs. Because Job has these sores, these are evidence that Job is guilty and that he is experiencing God's wrath. Isn't that sad? Someone's life isn't going well and their friends all reject him with blame and unsupportiveness. This book is like a teaching on how not to act as a friend. You know, I'm kind of embarrassed to say this. I've never thought about it from that perspective. At least not that I remember. I feel like I'm very deeply theological about this book. But that's a really good point. That's a really good point. This book is like a teaching on how to not act as a friend. That's a really good point. Well, I mean, the titles are what the titles are. I didn't think about that a lot, though. But fair point. I did, yeah. Truth be told, because I am always going to be honest, I will aggregate titles for the Bible studies from titles in the Bible. So whatever the chunk of text we're reading is, I'll look through the titles of what's in the Bible because it's usually somewhat of a summary and the titles on YouTube have to be short. So that's the honest truth. I did not think about it at all. But even if I had, for the title, I've never deeply thought about the idea of, or the perspective of looking at this as like a moral teaching for friendship, of what to avoid, what not to do in terms of friendship. I just never have. I've been very, very deep in this one, and I've never looked at it from that. It's very simple, but it's very good. It's very good. That's a great point. It's a fantastic point. I'm going to try to keep that in mind the next time I read it. It's very simple, but it's extremely true. Yeah. It's wonderful teaching about how not to be a friend. You have a friend just begging for understanding. Like, I need you to understand me. I need you to have my back, to show me sympathy. And they just refuse and just come at him and come at him and come at him. It's a fantastic point. He is torn from the tent in which he trusted and is brought to the king of terror. In his tent dwells that which is none of his. Sulfur is scattered over his habitation. His roots dry up beneath and his branches wither above. There's quite a bit here. So in 15, in his tent dwells that which is none of his. Tents were often used as describers, as descriptive things in terms of welfare and wealth in context of people. So an enlargement of the tent would signify riches and wealth and prosperity. And one example of that is out of Isaiah 54, where enlarge the place of your tent and let the curtains of your habitation be stretched out. Do not hold back, lengthen your cords and strengthen your stakes. And then God protects or restores the tent of his people in a number of places in the Old Testament. Jeremiah has it, Psalm has it. Adversely, thorns grow in the tent of the wicked. Hosea 9:6 has that. So because of just the culture and the time period, tents were often a way to describe, and that would add, they were a good way to exegetically understand more about the text sometimes when it had to do with, or when there was context about the tents. The modern church agrees with Job's friends. In fact, they emulate it. Dang, brutal. The sad irony. It really is, yeah. It really is. Very sad. And then it said, sulfur is scattered over his habitation. So, an instrument of divine judgment, along with fire, obviously. Genesis, Deuteronomy, they both have mentions of it. But it describes the land becoming desolate after being burned with brimstone and salt. And a lot of the hell stuff comes out of things like this. But Genesis 19:24 said, then the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from the Lord of heaven. Deuteronomy 29:23 said the whole land burned out with brimstone and salt. The term isn't used a lot, but when it's used, it's purposeful, it's intentional, and it really expresses something. So sulfur is scattered over his habitation really expresses something to the reader of the time. Like the actual audience of this text, which was not us, this would have really stood out to them. It would be very descriptive to them. That it said his roots dry up beneath. I love this. I love this. In chapter 14, Job said, for there is hope for a tree. If it be cut down, that it will sprout again, and that its shoots will not cease. Though its roots grow old in the earth, and its stump die in the soil, yet at the scent of water it will bud and put out branches like a young plant. And it was this beautiful section of Job 14 where Job is talking about the life cycle of a tree being this beautiful thing where even though it dies in a sense, it comes back. It has a resurrection of sorts. And what he was talking about is how he wishes to not have that. He just wants to die. He just wants it to be over. And so now we have Job's friend drawing on that same idea. His roots dry up beneath and his branches wither above. Job's earlier example of the tree that could be regrown after being cut down to explore the hope of renewal, or a resurrection. A tree whose roots have dried up would have no hope of renewal. They'd have no hope of regrowth. that have no hope of resurrection. A tree whose roots have dried up is dead permanently. If that doesn't impress you about whoever the author of this was, I don't know what would impress you. It's a literary masterpiece. It's so well done. Cannot say it enough. Patricia is top tier and can certainly fill places. That's a load of crap. Patricia is somebody who asks questions often. I know we haven't seen you much recently, but who was asking questions often, where I'd have to sit stupid for a second and think about it, because I'd be like, damn, that is a really good question. Like, the thing she just brought up all the time. Said, I love the nature metaphor. I do too. I'm a big fan. I was a big gardening guy for a long time, believe it or not. And so I'm a big fan of all that stuff. His memory perishes from the earth, and he has no name in the streets. He is a nameless man. He is thrust from light into darkness and driven out of the world. He has no posterity or progeny among his people, and no survivor where he used to live. So not only will the wicked be destroyed, but their entire life will be cut off. Their entire line will be cut off. In this character's first speech, Bildad is probably referencing the death of the children. That was in Job 8:4, where he said, if your children have sinned against him, God, has sinned against God, he has delivered them into the hand of the transgressor. Ironically, being that we were there for the prologue and the friends here, the characters were not, we know that Job loved his family so much and was so sinless that he would give offerings to God on behalf of his children, just in case, not because they sinned, not because he thought they sinned, but out of fear that they might sin. And the friends still have the gall to say, basically, your kids sinned, and that's why God killed them. Brutal. Oh, I could never answer that question right now. Impossible. Patricia said, what's everyone's main takeaway from the book of Job? I'm jumping ahead a bit, but I'm curious. I will not even attempt to answer. I still don't know. It's changed over the years for me. I think it's meant to teach theology. But I know that I'm wildly biased in that, so I try to not put a lot of confidence in it. But that's what it's always taught me. The book of Job taught me more about free will and about the problem of good and evil. Like a lot of these really problematic issues in the Christian world and the apologetics world and talking to atheist people world. A lot of the stuff gets taught, or a lot of stuff that gets brought up. I think a lot of it can be solved or sorted, at least, in the book of Job. But I think it teaches a lot more than that too. But I think it was meant to teach theology. I think very plainly, and it's way deeper than that. But I think the problem of good and evil, we get a decent layout of this idea that how stupid are we to think we know what's going on? Like, how us of such small mind in this small reality, dealing with these small things, how ignorant and arrogant of us to pretend that we know what's going on. Because the whole story, the underlying thing is that it began with things going on that we had no idea about. The characters have no idea about it. We only know as the reader what's going on because we got a prologue where we see evil and good at a conference table together, talking, making deals, having issues. And then the story takes place post that meeting. And so the characters don't know, but we know.
I also, I gather from it that he shows us what we're supposed to do no matter what's going on. We're supposed to focus on what we're doing and not fall into the wickedness, like it said, fall into the trap.
Yeah. No, I like that too. Yeah, that's a good angle. I think it's totally fair. It's a tough text though, man. David said it taught me not to listen to my friends. I can't tell if that's a joke because of what we were saying about the friends earlier. If that's
It kind of helped me with the whole friends aren't real position I hold too.
Really? I mean, I could see it. I could see it. I'd like to think like not a lot of people are experiencing friends like that, but it kind of sounds like.
Yeah, why are those your friends?
Right, right, right. That's really sad, actually. How lame. Friends aren't real position. Tell me more, Patricia said.
Well, at least our idea of what friends are supposed to be isn't real. Like, people disappoint us. So, like, to think that, like, I think it's setting yourself up for disappointment to think that that's not going to happen at some point in time. So, like, if friends aren't supposed to do that kind of stuff, then we're kind of like, we're living in a fairy tale there because people are going to disappoint no matter what.
For sure. For sure. I think you could probably find some friends who are better than these, but it's a good reflection of like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of, it's a bit dramatic, this text. I've never had friends like this, at least, but I'm not probably the guy to ask either, because I've never had a lot of very close friends, but I would like to think most like good friends might not believe you, but would probably still support you, like kind of still have your back. But I guess I don't know. I'm sure a lot of people have been totally betrayed. I have been on small levels, but nothing savage. It's very exaggerated. Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah. But it all draws together, right? Like that's the whole thing is I think this is a text you could study for years and years if you were to really, really go through like the data aggregation process and be like, we're going to pick apart every little thing about this and see what we can draw and pull from it. Years, because there's just so much. One, it's pretty long. And then two, there's so many different angles you can take. Even if you were just to try to study the issue of good and evil, be like, okay, I want to make sense of the problem of good and evil theologically using the book of Job only. This is hundreds of hours of data, hundreds and hundreds, and you could get a lot of information from it. I think the same could be said about the friend thing, because you guys are right. And now, like the more I'm thinking about it, the more I agree with that. I think you could pull a lot of information about just like, I guess, interpersonal communication, to put it like plainly. You got the little bit about the wife, but the majority of the interaction is between like sexes on a friend platonic level. So I think you could extrapolate a lot of that and probably be pretty interesting. I don't know. I think we got a little bit more here and we're good for the night. Tuesday is, well, actually, just hold on. Let me finish. So his roots dry up beneath me, and his branches wither above. His memory perishes from the earth, and he has no name in the streets. He thrusts from light into darkness, and is driven out of the world. He has no posterity or progeny among his people, and no survivor where he used to live. They of the West are appalled at his day, and horror seizes them of the East. Surely such are the dwelling of the unrighteous. Such is the place of him who knows not God. Pretty rough. It's just getting rougher and rougher. So next Sunday, we'll start with Job again. And there's a few more back and forths. And then we get the ending. The beginning and the ending, in my opinion, are just like, they're very hot. Super hot. High temperature. And the middle just builds and builds and builds and builds. And I know a lot of people lose focus and they lose attention. And then they get to the end and it's like, damn, what happened? It's like, you didn't follow. Man, if you really, really follow, it's incredibly impressive how this text ends. How it all gets brought and wrapped together. It's so impressive from a literary perspective. Tuesday, we are talking about decoding the names of God. So that'll be interesting. I think I'm going to do the best I can to do both. It just might be hard. So and what I mean is like God the Father and Jesus Christ. Because you could do an hour on each. No problem. There's plenty of data there. But we'll at least do Yahweh. We'll at least do the Father. And then Jesus, if we have time, we'll do. But I'll have some of it ready. I'll post a little podcast topic thing in case anybody wants to put anything in there, for Tuesday. And then Thursday, Book of Giants. And then Saturday, if I'm able to, we'll read the Gospel of Judas. I'm hoping to be able to. We got a lot of stuff going on the next couple months. So I'm going to do the best I can over the next couple months. But there will be some off days, unfortunately. David's got a good point, though. His friends are a reflection of church culture that says it's because you are sinning that you are suffering, and the negative impacts of the mindset. Yeah, see, I guess I won't name her because we don't see her a lot anymore, but there was somebody in our group who's still around a bit, but had a really bad church experience where she was told that, basically. And I worked in the church and I've gone to church for a long time and all that stuff. And I had never really seen that. I had never really seen this theology of it's because the Job theology. Well, you're sinning and that's why bad things are happening to you. I just had never seen that in real life, of people trying to genuinely tell people theologically that you were a bad boy and God is punishing you because of that. Thank you. You're such a doll. Until I started this group. And then since we've done this group, I've had a dozen people come in here and us get on voice channels and talk for hours. And they explain like, no, that's exactly what they told me. It kind of blew me away. The alarm just went off. David, you're the man. I'm pretty sure everyone here is good. This was a small group tonight. This was our people tonight. If you're watching this later, do that stuff. Yeah. David is the greatest marketer of all time. It is true. Sometimes it's sneaky and not outright said either. Yeah, I would imagine. Right? I would imagine. I would imagine, especially from pastors. I just had no idea. I had no idea. I thought the churches that I was around sucked, and I thought they were terrible and evil at the core. But they didn't say that. If I would have ever heard one of the other like associate pastors tell somebody like in pastoral counseling, well, you're sinning and therefore God is punishing you, I would have lost my mind. They tell you if their healing service didn't heal you, it's your fault? What? Oh my God. If the funny thing about that is most of that is a scam, right? So if their healing service didn't work, it's because you didn't play a part of the scam. Like you didn't do the flailing fish thing, which is what they needed you to do. And so because of that, it's because you're a heathen. It's not because they're con artists. Got it. Understood. We got to do a Tuesday on that stuff soon. The charismatic Pentecost, nothing against charismatic and Pentecostal, but the super hyper Pentecostal charismatic people. The magical instant healing and the flail fish seizure stuff, and no disrespect. I know it's not. I thought it was real forever until right now. David said you lack faith, Kat.
That I do?
Yeah.
You might have so much faith that it would overwhelm you.
He didn't say that. He said it's your lack of faith if you didn't get healed. Yeah, it's your lack of being a brainwashed cultist. In my very hardcore view, that's what that is. I just don't think that actually happens. I believe in miracles, but I think a lot of that is just con men and low IQ people. Not in an offensive way, just like in a literal way. I think people got roped into that stuff pretty easily, unfortunately. And it's very sad. All right. Well, the Tuesday little forum post thing will be up. And unless you guys have anything else, I am going to try to get some work done before bed. Ooh, Patricia said it's not like they tell you outright, but if you give them a problem or say you're struggling, it gets brushed off by telling you to pray and read your Bible, etc. Okay, well I've heard that a lot. So if that's it, then yeah, I've heard that a lot. This I think is very common, is that if you're dealing with bad stuff, well, I guess, I don't know, it's kind of twofold. I think that is good advice, is the problem. If you're struggling with things, I think it's good advice to like pray and read the Bible. I think it's very good advice. I think the problem with it is that people will say it because they don't want to deal with the problem. Like as a pastor, if you say that, instead of being like, okay, well, why don't we meet once a week? Why don't we talk through all this stuff? Like, let's see what's going on. Let's approach it with an actual solution after identifying all of your issues. And while we do that, like pray and read the Bible. I think that's great advice. On its own, it's a cop-out, which I think is what you were kind of getting at. But that's the implication of the advice if it's given too much without compassion and humanity. Yeah, right. Well, I agree with that. I think most churches are just lazy. I think pastors are lazy. I think they don't want to work. They already work very little. Those who say they don't, they're lying. I lived that life. You get paid full time to do, not a full-time job. Unless you guys do like a lot of abnormal to the normal church community events and stuff. You could get full-time for sure. But I know a lot of lead pastors don't. They mostly just have to deal with Sunday. So if you prep and finish by Tuesday, you're done. And my point is, they could be meeting with people. Like you could be having meetings regularly. You could care about your congregation there. All right. I love you guys. Have a good night. Have a good night. See you Tuesday for decoding the names of God. Good stuff. Good stuff. Love y'all.